Well, hello, folks out there in YouTube land. I got a wild show for you today. Yep, kicking Tennessee out of the SEC. Yeah, this is starting to get real. Folks, I covered this a couple days ago. I didn't really think that much of it. I just thought it was a Bama guy that was ticked off because Tennessee had beaten them 2 out of the last 3 years and, you know, just kind of decided to have a little fun with Tennessee about kicking them out of the SEC. It appears there is a slight possibility this could happen, and it's not a joke. And this story by Ross Dellinger details it. Yeah, the Power Conference is working on a contract to bind schools to new enforcement rules with strict punishments. Now, the talk of this came about because Tennessee's governor signed a bill that would allow Tennessee and any of the schools in the state of Tennessee to continue on pretty much with their NIL spending along with revenue sharing. And there's a multitude of reasons for this. One of it is to protect Spire Sports, because the way they're wanting to do this, they're wanting to replace NIL with a company called Deloitte that will decide as a clearinghouse whether or not you can have this NIL money or you can't as an athlete. And they're pretty much trying to take away pay for play. And the state of Tennessee is saying not so fast.
Not so fast, my friend.
Because they like Spire Sports, and there's also a big question about any of the legality of all of this as far as the NCAA versus House. And we've talked a lot about that, and we're going to get into why I don't really think this thing's going to pass mustard when it's all said and done. And I've been telling y'all that for a couple of months now, that while this sounds good, it's not going to pass mustard. It's just not. Now, it says officials from the Big Ten, SEC, Big 12, and ACC, they're circulating a draft of a groundbreaking and first-of-its-kind document intended to prevent universities from using their state laws to violate new enforcement rules in a wholly stunning concept, they call it. It requires schools to waive their right to pursue legal challenges against the new enforcement entity, the College Sports Commission. Now, here's the problem with that. You're asking schools to defy their own state laws and follow the rules of this commission. I don't even know if that's legal. So there's a major problem with this draft. But that's on top of the fact that the House versus NCAA might violate the Sherman Act. Because realize all this is House versus NCAA, and it's a class action lawsuit. It doesn't address whether or not this violates the Sherman Act. It says the document, now viewed by dozens of leading school administrators, would bind institutions to the enforcement policies even if their state law is contradictory. You also could not sue College Sports Commission, CSC. It indemnifies them from lawsuits. One athletic director says you have to sign it or we won't play you. As a condition of the membership, you must comply with the settlement and enforcement, says the Power Conference president. Now here's where, again, it gets real sticky. And a couple of law professors chimed in on this. One said arbitration itself isn't surprising, but saying you agree not to follow your state law, that may or may not be enforceable, a law professor from Tulane said. So no matter what the sides do, they're going to be sued. This is an effort to rein in the lawsuits. It's just not clear how enforceable these provisions would be. Here's another official that says sign an agreement that exempts a state university from following its own state law is particularly troubling. The executive director of the National College Players Association said. So that's especially true when the consequence is potential eviction from your own conference. And it even is addressed in the Tennessee state law. It says the law prevents an athletic association from adopting and enforcing rules that violate state law and prohibits any association from interfering with a school's membership status, voting rights, and revenue distribution. Wow. So the state laws already addressed this in case this happened. So the University of Tennessee is in an impossible situation. They're not allowed to sign this. They're not allowed to agree to that, given the state law that's in Tennessee. But this draft says if they don't, they can be kicked out, that other teams wouldn't play them. So it's an impossible situation for the University of Tennessee. So they really can't sign it. That's if it gets put in front of them. And here is an important part. It says, even if the judge approves the House settlement, her order will not address whether new NCAA rules that come out of the House settlement comply with antitrust law. She's only ruling on whether the settlement agreement is fair to absent class members. So again, it's probably going to fly in the face of the Supreme Court's ruling 9-0 in the Austin case. So let's talk about Tennessee for a minute here. One thing that the university learned, and they learned the hard way, is that they can't trust the NCAA. They cooperated fully with them over the whole Jeremy Pruitt thing, and they received like the highest grade, exemplary cooperation, handed over all the evidence, fired everybody involved, and cleaned house. And then the NCAA came back within a year and came after them over the Nico Iamaleava plane ride. And they were going to nail them over transportation by an NIL, which at that time was Spire Sports. And Tennessee warned them, said, do not come after us. We just cooperated with you. We're following the rules. Everything we've done is acceptable based on what we can do with NIL. And the NCAA said, nah, we're still going to sue you. So the university kicked their butt.
You're all clear, kid. Now let's blow this thing and go home.
And a lot of people blame Tennessee, the state of Tennessee, for doing that. And that was Attorney General Scametti. But hey, he warned them, and they just went ahead and did it anyway, which was really stupid. So Tennessee has learned that cooperation really isn't that important. They're still going to come after you no matter what. The second part of this is not only would they be violating state law, they don't want to get sued by the athletes because they think in my opinion, they think what's happening with the House versus NCAA is not going to stand judicial scrutiny. I think that's the right term. And I think they're 100% right because the Supreme Court has already told them, said, bottom line is the NCAA and its member colleges are suppressing pay of student athletes, basically a salary cap, who collectively generate billions of dollars in revenue for colleges every year. Those enormous sums of money flow to seemingly everyone except the student athletes. Now, that was prior before them getting paid. But the problem is you can't have a salary cap unless you collective bargain. So I keep coming back to this because it's a fact. You have one of two options. You can either go to the Congress and get an antitrust exemption, which is going to be unbelievably difficult to get. I would put that at less than 1% chance. The second way you can do this is the way the NFL has done it with collective bargaining. You have a union, they become employees, and you collectively bargain with the athletes. That way, the Sherman Act is not violated. If you go in and you unilaterally put up a salary cap, which is what this does, the athletes can sue. And here's what's going to create this. As soon as any collective, say Spire Sports or any of them out there, Alabama's got one, everybody's got one, and they say, okay, we've got you this multi-million-dollar deal, and it's from our collective. Or it could be $200,000. And Deloitte says, no, that's not acceptable. We don't think that's legitimate, and we're not going to let you have it. Not only is the athlete going to sue the NCAA, they can sue the university over that. And that's what Tennessee's trying to avoid. They don't want to get sued by the athlete because that may be where this heads next. And the University of Tennessee doesn't want to have to be paying out millions of dollars over a lawsuit. And they don't want their own athletes suing them. And why do I think the Deloitte clearinghouse would not allow all these various collectives paying athletes through NIL, name, image, and likeness? Let me show you this. It says, in a gathering in an ACC spring meeting last week, Deloitte officials shared notable figures with the athletic directors and coaches, including that 70% of past deals from booster collectives would have been denied, while 90% of past deals from public companies would have been approved. The problem is all the deals with the public companies are tiny. It said 80% of the NIL deals with public companies were valued at less than 10 grand. That's not going to get it done. The big deals are the ones with the collectives. They're the ones that can bring in a multi-million-dollar quarterback. And the other problem is $20.5 million. What Tennessee's concerned about is they're trying to have a really good football team, a really good basketball team, a really good baseball team, a really good women's basketball team, etc. To do that, you've only got that amount of money to work with. And a lot of places, a lot of schools, they may only do basketball or they may totally focus on football. And they don't want to be in a situation where they have to pick which sports they can actually care about. And here's the other issue. Texas is spending $40 million. They're going ahead and spending the NIL and the revenue sharing. What happens when this passes and they have to sign this document? What do you do with the athletes there? So a lot of them are trying to get in front of it with NIL deals, but will those be honored? Or is Deloitte going to come in there and say, oh, well, you can't do this, you can't do that? There's so much about this that's problematic. Tennessee is concerned about being put in a spot where they're getting sued. And now it's possible with this draft that's going around that the SEC may be threatening them if you don't sign this. It's a very difficult situation. And Tennessee, who was the darling a month ago when they stood up to Nico and said, hey, we're not going to let you push us around, and everybody loved Tennessee for that. Now it may reverse and Tennessee becomes the villain. Oh, well, you won't sign this, and see, you don't want to play by the rules. So we could be right back in the doghouse with everybody all over the country, which, hey, Tennessee's kind of used to being there anyway. So we keep coming back to the fact they need to fix this properly. And here's the thing about the NCAA you need to understand. Why have they been so difficult to deal with on so many of these issues? When they received that 9-0 vote by the Supreme Court, that should have been the alarm bell that, okay, we are doing this all wrong. We're breaking the rules, we're breaking the law.
Stop breaking the law, asshole!
I mean, 9-0 is almost impossible. If you get a 9-0, you're just all wrong. Everything you're doing is wrong. Well, the NCAA's used to being in charge. Also, they are trying to protect all the other sports because realize if you go in there and you just do revenue sharing for the football only because it's the only one that brings in big money, or basketball, a lot of the other sports could get kicked out because universities wouldn't have money for them. So the NCAA wants to keep all of that going by having just a percentage of the revenue going to the players. See, in the NFL, they get like half. Well, in this, they're getting 10 to 20%, just depending on the size of your budget. For example, $20.5 million of Tennessee's full budget of $280 million, that's less than 10%. For some other schools that might only bring in $110 million, well, that's like almost 20% right there at 20.5. So those other small schools, they might have to decide they're not going to have rowing or golf or tennis or numerous sports that are out there. And as a former golfer at the University of Tennessee, I don't want to see golf being eliminated in Tennessee, but it's not impossible that could happen over time. So I think the NCAA is trying to protect the other sports, which makes sense. But again, when it's all said and done, it's all about the Sherman Act.
Oh, my baby. Shum.
It's a law that was passed over 100 years ago to protect employees and to protect citizens to be able to make the maximum amount of money they can make in an open market. This is not an open market. It's a salary cap, and the athletes didn't negotiate that. It's not collective bargaining. They don't have a union rep that's negotiating on their behalf. This has to do with players from the past and a class action lawsuit. It's not a true negotiation from the current athletes like you have in the NFL, NBA, NHL, all of those places. That's the way they do it. That's where we're going to have to go to. Outside of some miracle and the Senate and the House and the president all of a sudden says, yeah, we're going to give you this antitrust exemption. Outside of that happening, which I put it, let's just call it 0%, maybe 1%. You're going to have to do collective bargaining. So the only thing I like about the House versus NCAA is at least they're doing some form of revenue sharing, which at least gets them down that path, but it's not a solution. It's not, and I've been saying it for months, you got to look at the Supreme Court decision. 9-0, man. The way you're doing this is not going to work.
I'd unfriend you.
That's not how it works. That's not how any of this works.
So now Tennessee's in the hot seat. They're kind of looked at like, oh, you better cooperate. This is going to get real tricky because they really can't. I don't know if that draft's going to be formalized or not, or whether they'll try to force, and there may be other universities that can't do it either. So anyway, this thing's getting real. And that Bama Hammer guy down there, whew, he's loving it. He wrote an article today. This is the Ronald Evans guy. He said, kicking the Tennessee Vols out of the SEC is getting serious. He said, a few days ago, a suggestion that Greg Sankey should kick Tennessee out of the SEC. Well, that was your suggestion, sir. He said it was more fanciful than practical. He said, while the Vols and their henchmen in the Tennessee state legislature obviously intend to ignore any sensible constraints on paying players, there are no sensible constraints unless you do collective bargaining. you're breaking the Sherman Act. Sorry, it's just the way that it is. Said it now appears that a threat of expulsion is no longer implausible. So it is possible. So you know that guy's so happy. Jeez. Anyway, I'm going to keep you abreast of this as it goes forward. This could get real tricky. Now, I can go ahead and tell you the next 12, 24, 36 months. Well, Dalton, just tell him.
It'll get worse before it gets better.
Yeah, it's going to get way worse before it gets better.
Roadhouse.
The next few years, this thing's going to get insane. You're going to have lawsuit after lawsuit. All this house settlement thing does is pay a ton of lawyers. Let me show you this. You want to know why the attorneys and the lawyers are so excited about getting this deal done and, oh, we got to do it, we got to do it? Nobody's talked about this. I'm going to talk about it. It says legal fees in the House versus NCAA are a significant aspect of the agreement, with the plaintiffs' lawyers seeking substantial compensation for their work. Plaintiffs' attorneys in the House versus NCAA requested roughly $525 million.
What?
Of the $2.8 billion. So the attorneys will be getting $500 million.
You think that'd be enough?
In attorney fees. That's why they're so excited about this deal. You would be too. It says the attorney fees are intended to cover the significant time, effort, and risk associated with pursuing such a complex antitrust litigation. Well, gosh, I hope $500 million is enough. So realize when you hear attorneys out there talking about this, they want to get this settled. I mean, look, this is enough money to make them beyond rich, beyond their wildest dreams for the rest of their life and all of their kids' lives and their grandkids' lives. So there are all kinds of power plays being made in this. So when you hear things that are put out there, don't be surprised if there's a reason you're hearing it, or that there might be some other motive besides, oh, we're taking care of those athletes. Why do you need $500 million if you're all about the athletes? That's who's making the money in this. It's not the student athletes. It's not the schools. It's the attorneys. Sorry, it's true. What's that? Phone? Okay. Give it to me. Hello? You're an attorney for the House versus NCAA? Cease and desist. I'll regret this for the rest of my life. Well, I don't think that's very nice. You'll destroy me. Well, I don't think that's very nice either. Okay. Folks, I made a mistake. They're not going to make anything. It's just a little bit of money for their time and effort, that's all.
Disperse! Nothing to see here, please!
You know, no big deal. And anything I said before that, just kind of forget about it. It's no big deal. They're just making, I think they're making like $20 an hour. So I don't know where I read that. That was probably bogus. Anyway, if you like this content, be sure to hit that like button. Lets me know to continue to cover all these big college sports stories. If you've not subscribed, boom, 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 hit that button right there. It won't cost you a dime. Help you get these videos and help you keep up with it. And right over here's the most recent video. YouTube thinks you'll enjoy. And we'll see you next time on Sports Talk Jay.
You can do what you want to us, but we're not going to sit here and listen to you bad mouth the United States of America. Gentlemen!